happy Thursday, all, and happy birthday to me. Good evening. We are the Vets Helping Vets TV show, and I am Jillian with K9s for Veterans. And this is Jonathan, and he is also part of us today. I'm joined by him from the same thing. And this is a live interactive show on CanTV 21. We are also streaming online at cantv.org/hotline. The next 25 minutes is your chance to discuss current events for our military. And
just keep talking.
okay.
Our camera's froze here, so we're just going to keep going with it.
Yes. So call the number at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. And yeah, so let's get going with, what have we missed since the last time John and I did this? Well,
holy crap, so much.
We last time had left off on the people, the militias were storming the bases, and the Marines had gotten over there, and they were like, nope, we're good.
Right.
So that was where we had left off. Well, it was the following Tuesday, I believe, when the ballistic missiles started to get fired on bases and all of that stuff had happened. And we would like to talk about that from the perspective of a veteran who is combat experienced but not combat able, and a wife of such during that it was a really stressful few days.
Right.
So why don't you start off by what actually logistically happened?
Logistically, or factually, we dropped a bomb on the leader of the Iran militia in Iraq.
So from what I hear, he was a really bad guy too.
Yeah, he was I wish I
It was not
there.
It was not a bad choice or a loss for this world that he's not.
He was a horrible individual, and he got off too easy in my mind. But
it was not.
He was killed along with an Iraqi general and several other Iraqi military personnel. The following day, Iran retaliated with a ballistic missile attack on an...
Was that the next day?
The
It was within the next few days. Because when I remember when everything had happened, I was listening to a podcast that was talking about how the people... The government felt that the people were being supportive because they had come out to his funeral, and there was all those people trampled for it and everything.
Oh yeah, he was loved by Iran and Iraq.
So
he was slated to be the next, I don't know, president or.
He was important to them, and when all of that was going on, Iran was saying that they were going to.
They were going to attack.
Retaliate
they were going to make a retaliatory attack against the U.S. from Iran, not one of their proxies, not one of their militia groups, but Iran itself.
And I know between him and I had speculated whether or not it would be some cyber attack thing or attacking an infrastructure thing, but they were starting to say then after that it was going to be, they're going to be attacking the military end of it. Meanwhile, we had our president who was saying things about attacking places of theirs that weren't exactly received well by the public.
There was trash talking back and forth.
Right, okay. So then, that being said,
before a fight.
When Tuesday came around, our perspective, we had our little 8-year-old and her best friend at dance class. And myself and the girls, come out to the car where John's waiting to drive us home, and he was just in a state that I had not seen in a while. I would say the last time I saw you like that was during the Boston bombing. Yeah, and I know that means that something not good is going on in the world, and he wants to be there and able to do something about it, but he cannot. So that leaves us to what happened that day then. So you were checking the news as you always do and keeping up on that situation, and then what happened?
Oh, just heard a breaking report on the radio that our bases, Iraq's bases where U.S. personnel were living, was getting hit with ballistic missiles from Iran. And there's a huge difference between a ballistic missile and the rockets and mortars that are typically fired.
And I did not know that, so I proceeded to ask him, what's the difference? And go on.
So, from my understanding, ballistic missile is what we would use to to send a nuclear bomb or some sort of any sort of nasty.
Any sort of next
Oh
level.
God, any of our hazardous bomb types. Anyway, they're bad news. They travel a long distance and they cost a lot of money, meaning that no rebel group or proxy army could afford them. So them
It was coming from the actual country then that meant.
they were being fired from Iran and hitting inside Iraq.
And they were going towards
it was-
our bases, and it was
They were going for the housing complexes on our for where the U.S. personnel were stationed.
okay. So that's what he's telling me, and I'm thinking to myself, the first thing I think is, okay, well, technically this isn't like really like here right now, so we're okay. And then at the same time, I'm reading him, and there's something troublesome about how he's responding to everything, because it's telling me, just because I've known him for so long and we are that
Oh man,
into it with each other, it's something I just can read that it's not good for us here either. And I started later on in the evening asking him, well, what are we afraid of is going to happen? And he started telling me about how it could just escalate from one thing to another when it comes to our response now, because we haven't had a response, and at the time there was no reports on anything
other than the missiles were being launched by Iran and landing on and around the base.
which then that led him to believe that there might be a large amount of casualties, which would mean that there was going to be a huge response.
Right. With that was my personal thoughts.
Right.
The media was being kept out of it so that Americans wouldn't
Panic.
demand a
Retaliatory
a
response, yeah.
retaliatory bombing. So I was fearing for mass casualty situation.
Which is obviously
Right,
awful, and
which
I'm
it-
preparing for him learning that, and at the same time, I'm worried that there's just things I can't even think of when it comes to our world and then the national end of it too. And like, I go, should we be getting out of the big cities? Like, should we be? And he's like, no, not yet. And I'm like, well, will you tell me if we need to get out of Chicago? He said, yeah, of course. And then we just carried on with our evening, and then the next morning came, and there was a report of no casualties. And
That was strange.
yes, and at the same time, it was good news, way better than what we had.
Right. It was. I mean, best case scenario to hear. You just had 11 or 13, however many rockets it was, fired at our bases, and nobody was hit. Nobody was injured, and that was just such a breath of relief until a few days later when
When we start getting
our-
told from the media that there is injuries,
they're starting to bring in reported cases of traumatic brain injuries.
mild traumatic brain injuries.
They're starting to trickle in. And it started with like 15, and then the next day it was 30.
And to be honest with you guys, I didn't even notice it in the news, because whenever I'm looking at military stuff and I see traumatic brain injury, I automatically assume I know whatever it is they're talking about, and like I just move on, because if it's not new like information on how to treat it or something like that, then I assume that it just has to do with the amount or the stuff that I already know when it comes to John's traumatic brain injury. And you know, he received his when he was in Iraq in 2006, 2005, 2006, and he was exposed to about, what was it, 13 different explosions. The last one was the one that did the damage. But that was what was the type of explosion that was the last one? That was a triple stack. What's
it was,
that?
155 millimeter mortars.
Okay, so it was 100. So how is that different than what a ballistic missile is? Do you think?
I'd say a mortar, a 155 would take out this building. A ballistic missile with the right
A properly
on it,
made, yeah, whatever.
could take out, I don't know, a quarter of the state. So
Okay, so you're talking
is my
Understanding of it.
understanding of it at least.
Okay, so the gravity of their damage ability is just
So the difference is maybe 50 to 100 casualties if it's a heavy populated area and it gets hit with a
Well,
155
and
versus,
Now, what I'm thinking is, what I've always heard and learned and believe about the traumatic brain injuries, especially when it comes to the combat ones that are related to, like, vehicles specifically, but just in general, the force of the explosion going out and then coming back in and all of that energy going through your brain and shaking everything is what really does the damage, because your brain is not meant to handle that kind of turbulence, we'll call it. And with that force and that jarring around and everything like that, if it was that much and that strong enough to do it in a car with that,
well,
with that
there's a kill casualty radius. So there's a kill radius, which means anything
within,
inside of X amount of meters is guaranteed to be killed. Because of said force and the
okay.
and shrapnel or whatever else is coming from that.
So that's with any type of,
So let's say a grenade.
Okay.
There's a kill casualty radius of 5 meters. So anything within 5 meters of it will be killed. Anything within 15 will get injured.
so is that like hard and fast, or is that just like a without a doubt?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
That's by the book.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's a kill casualty. So anything outside of 5 meters away from that grenade going off
It has a chance of survival.
is going to get injured,
But it will be,
but
yeah.
it is going to survive. And that factors in, again, the shrapnel, the blast.
Now, what's the kill casualty radius on the
Oh, not a clue.
I was gonna say the 155, like that was
Yeah,
underneath.
I have no clue.
So when the IED exploded, it was directly underneath John's vehicle.
And that's if it's fired properly.
And
so
part of-
the IEDs are not.
Well, and part of what happened with John's specific incident was that the insurgents had dug from underneath a wall and tunneled into the street and put the bomb there. They never packed it back in with the gravel and ground and whatnot that they normally do. So when the explosion went off, part of that force that really
A lot of
does
the
the
force
damage
went out through that hole.
And
Instead
that's
of coming directly up, and that's
exactly, that's probably what saved him and his guys.
Right.
But that being said, that's still enough force without any of that to do that kind of damage, and that's a much smaller thing that we're talking about. So these ballistic missiles had to have, without a doubt, been mild traumatic brain injury causing, and
I'm surprised.
not.
I think we're up to 64 right now, and those numbers are light in my mind.
Well, and I'm sure that
the guys are playing the "I'm okay," shake it off.
Walk it off, here's some Motrin.
Yeah, that's what a lot of them are doing, and that's what I did. I tried to do, and in the long run, it's going to come back, and we're going to have
And what's one of the things that
hundreds of our guys that are going to show up with these from these.
well, we have
big
those are
missiles.
that's one of the biggest, that is the biggest injury.
It's a signature
of-
war of the wound.
Signature injury of the war.
There we go. Having
So,
fun tonight.
right? Which is, it's also known as the walking wounded. That's also called invisible injuries. All of that being said, it's because the injury itself does not present like a limb loss, where you can see what the person is missing or no longer able to use, or
Right,
is.
you can see it.
It makes sense. It just you can see it. It's there, and it's just clear cut as far as an instinct. Like I said, at first glance, you understand the person is not.
All right, let's move.
Well, no. So all of that being said, you have an obvious injury in that sense. When you have a traumatic brain injury, it is
It's not obvious. The symptoms are varied. From
with mild
individual-
traumatic brain injuries especially.
Right.
You do not have the outward symptoms that you would have with a limb loss or something.
So days, I understand it taking days for these reports to come out on the TBIs because it takes that long for the symptoms to start showing up. It's not an immediate, bomb goes off, you get hit with shrapnel, you lose your arm. Okay, you can see that, you can fix that.
There's bleeding. Stop the bleeding.
Right.
Like
with
that's-
with the TBIs, blast goes off and you feel it, and you feel weird. You feel different. You're probably deaf for a few hours at the minimum, but
and you're assuming you probably have a concussion. I'm
right.
thinking, but
nauseous. Anyway, over the next few days, symptoms start showing up, more and more problems start happening, and as those problems start happening or developing, that's when you're going to see guys start going to talk to their medics.
And knowing now what we did not know when John was injured, like, you need to get them out of there, you need to get them screened and
Right.
treatment and all that kind of stuff, because the first 6 months is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that the first 6 months is crucial is important to me because I want people to know that these injuries are real. They're more than just a headache. The President of the United States said that it was just a headache.
Right.
He dismissed it. And I'm not going to politically say what my beliefs are. I'm not going to say anything besides the fact that that was wrong. It was factually inaccurate, and it was extremely disrespectful and hurtful to the people who have been suffering with these injuries and who've been fighting for that stigma of, oh, it's nothing, just get over it, for many, many years now and many years to come. The VFW National Commander called for...
an apology from the president
And-
over his statements.
I absolutely...
We
Back
100%
him.
agree with him.
And we
This is
want you to know that it's something that is real. We know that it's real.
right.
And with all of that being said, now you probably have people who are in these bases or on these bases who have these symptoms and whatnot, and they're thinking, okay, well, if nobody's gonna, like, this probably is nothing. Like, nobody's gonna believe me
Right.
anyway. What's the point in reporting it? Well, those first 6 months
Are critical.
are critical. So if you're gonna improve any sort of substantial way that is beneficial to your life, it's gonna happen within those first 6 months. And if you're not gonna acknowledge that it exists and not treat it at all, that's something that
And not just my problem with what the president said on TBIs is that as commander-in-chief, these are his wars. It's his decision whether or not to have us anywhere in the world, and for him to not accept or to understand that these are significant injuries that are
and even to speak
directly caused
directly related to these
by
wars.
him and his.
Well, it's on top of it, I think, dismissal of the gravity of
Yeah,
his position and his words, because
Mm-hmm.
you are the leader of the free world and people look up to you and believe you and all of those kind of things. So when it comes to the injuries that are sustained by our service members, how could you not, if you're not properly educated on this
Right.
information,
To downplay it like that is just
disrespectful at the very least,
it is going to set us back
substantially.
quite a bit. All right, so what other
That
topics
being
we
said,
got for today?
that being said,
20 minutes on that.
well, I think that we covered it well, and that was part of it.
Alright.
We wanted to talk a little bit about the service animals, emotional therapy animals that were.
The Department of Transportation is looking at a bill or changing the law to only allow dogs, service dogs, on planes and other forms of public transportation. Right now, we have people claiming emotional service animals, anything from.
There's a peacock.
There was a peacock,
Coyote.
not a lizard, but a hamster, cats, all kinds of stuff. People are bringing these on planes. They're not trained well, and they are wreaking havoc on the reputation or the image of service animals, because
People, for starters, don't understand the difference between service animals and emotional support animals.
Right.
That's
K9s
with
for
that.
Veterans is all about service animals. We adopt dogs from kill shelters. We train them at our training facilities downtown Chicago. We pair them up with a veteran, and that is a trained service dog. It's like a prescription that
It's even more so you guys match them up with the veterans. Like they're,
well,
they're
you need to be matched up with a veteran, and the dog and the vet have to have the same kind of personality.
And that's
a
important.
matching
I
what
like
I'm
that.
talking about.
I like to acknowledge that part of
If
it.
you've got a greyhound and a double amputee, or double leg amputee, one of them enjoys running, or one of them needs to run all day, and the other is going to
Can't,
have a more
right.
difficult time of doing that.
Well, it's, I mean, even our service dog, she's a puggle, so people kind of look. We've had her for a very long time, but
Yeah.
she was always kind of looked at like, wait a second, where's the lab or German Shepherd or the big dog? Like, she was a little puggle,
Right.
but for John, he didn't need the physical support or
She-
anything. But she was.
In order to be a service animal, they have to perform at least 3 tasks that the individual cannot do for themselves or is medically necessary. I believe that's the phrasing or the definition. But just somebody saying that they want to bring their animal because they don't want to either pay the extra charges of having them shipped in the crate or they can't leave them behind, that's wrong, and leads to a lot of discrimination.
Well, and it leads to a public distrust of
Right.
the whole
Perception is off.
right of the whole thing, which is not what this is. This is a misuse and misguided
Right.
attempt
They're
at
abusing
using
the
the
system.
system.
They're abusing the system.
and
So we're hoping that this legislation passes. If it already hasn't, I'm hoping that it does. But it will allow only, service dogs to be allowed to accompany
or
individuals.
cats, I think too.
No,
No,
it's
just dogs.
Dogs and miniature horses are the 2 service animal. Yeah, there's 2 service animals. Last I checked, the national guidelines. But anywho, what else we got?
Let's see. We have a 2020 census that wants military spouses. So if you are a military spouse and looking for a job, there's an option for you. I pulled some things from our VFW magazine recently so that we would have some topics to discuss when we came upon days like this. It was the anniversary of the deadliest day in Iraq 15 years ago on January 26th. So there's a solid moment of silence, I think, needed for that. That'd be a good moment. Okay, so we are down to our last few minutes, and I think that I'm going to close out with some reminders about trauma anniversaries. They are very real. They are
Explain what it is.
when you have a significant trauma like the ones experienced by John, which I've talked about, or a trauma that is even a car accident that was very bad that you suffered, or that whatever else you experienced out of the normal realm of human experiences that was considered a trauma. The 6 weeks before it and the 6 weeks after it are very emotional and just hypervigilant times without you even realizing it. It's going to be a quick and easy thing to trigger you to make a anxiety or a panic response. Just
Your body
inevitable.
gets ready for that to happen again.
the smell, sound, taste, anything, any one of your senses can be just set off by it without you even realizing it. The season of the year when your body feels the temperature change, that could trigger you. You don't know what it could be, so there's not a need to worry about it, because some years it happens and some years it doesn't. But if
You need to know that it
exists,
and if someone in your life or you have had a severe trauma, it doesn't have to be a military trauma, but rapes, hard assaults, any of these things, the 6 weeks prior and 6 weeks after the date of the event, just know that your body is physiologically preparing for that to happen again.
It's extra hypervigilant than it would normally be. Like
Right.
One of John's trauma anniversaries is at the beginning of March. So I know when the last week of January hits that there's a extra need for my attention to his
And understanding.
state. Yeah.
She's extremely understanding when it's around that time. Just
I give him the extra benefit of the doubt because I
Right.
understand that it's not probably something that he's able to control or
Right.
responsible for.
and
So
typically I don't even realize I'm doing it.
yeah,
So that's anyway. Trauma anniversaries.
they're real, they exist, and
And they suck.
will end look them up, read about them, learn about them, talk about them with your therapist. And I'm going to call it a day. And so thank you very much and have a good night.